See you later, Catfish.
Good trip.
1861. We're going to go right before the start of the Civil War. Now this street we're going to turn on right here is Truman. But back in 1861, this street did not exist. It was just a forest. I'll leave you with that until we get around the corner. Okay. So in 1861, this was just a forest. I told you a little bit ago that we have 3 Navy bases here on the island. We also have an Army base. That Army base is about a mile up here to our left, and it's kind of tucked away inside of one of those Navy bases. Today on that Army base, they train Army Rangers. But back in 1861, it was just a regular old Army base. But the captain of that Army base, well, he was a little concerned that there might be a coming war. Now, sitting about a half a mile behind us, there's a fort. That fort is called Fort Zachary Taylor. That fort is on the western side of our island, and it sits right on the edge of the island. And the cannons from that fort will cover any ships that are heading up the passage that goes from the Atlantic over to the Gulf of Mexico. So it's a very strategic place, and he was concerned that the Southerners may want to take it. I'll come back to that story in a minute. This big building on your right, that used to be our hospital. So back in 1898, remember I told you about the USS Maine blowing up in Havana Harbor? All of the folks that were wounded on that ship were treated in this hospital. When the Spanish-American War broke out shortly thereafter, all of our wounded were treated here. In between these 2 buildings coming up here, I want you to look straight back to your right. See that stone grotto back there? That stone grotto was built by a nun. Now she built that thing right after 3 consecutive hurricanes hit this island. Those 3 hurricanes did a great deal of damage and killed a bunch of people. So she built that grotto as a place to go light candles and hopefully prevent future storms. Well, since that was built, we have not had a major hurricane hit this island. Since that was built, we have not had a death from a major hurricane on this island in those 120 years. Now back to that death, he marched down this street to head back for that fort. He cut this street out of this forest, and he called the street Division Street because it divided the island in 2 pieces. He brought his entire troop to that fort, and that fort became the only fort in the southern half of the United States that stayed in northern hands for the entire Civil War. Now coming up on your right, if you can see the roof of this building here on the corner, there's a little tiny porch up there. This building is our historic firehouse. This is firehouse number 3. This building has stood since the 1800s. Today it's a museum for the fire department, and they have all kinds of their antique equipment in here and upstairs as well. But what I want you to notice most is in that first door over there, you can see a bell. You see that bell sitting out in there right by the front window? Well, back in the 1800s, they had little bells like that all over the island. Those bells were where you would go if you saw a fire, and you'd ring one, and they could hear it from anywhere on the island, right here. Now these next 2 blocks, for what we call a silent zone. That means I have to be quiet. You all can talk amongst yourselves, and I'll be back in 2 blocks. You see these trees over here with the orange kind of blossoms up on the top? And there's one right over our head. Those are called Royal Poincianas. They only bloom those orange little blossoms once a year. And they do it for a very short time. So you guys hit the town in the right time and you got to see them. They're quite beautiful. So back in the 1700s, the Spaniards came here. And they called this island Cayo Hueso. Cayo Hueso means Island of Bones. The reason they called it the Island of Bones is because when they came on shore down on the beaches down here, the beaches were littered with human remains. Stacks and stacks. Hundreds of human remains. And they couldn't figure out why they were there, because there just weren't very many people here. So a few days later, a Native American came on shore with a canoe, and he was dropping off a dead body. So the Spaniards said, "What's the story?" And he told them that this island is made out of one big rock, solid rock. Can't dig down into it, can't grow much of anything here. So they just brought their dead here and let nature take its course. So the Spanish stuck with the name Cayo Hueso, Island of Bones. Now a few years later, the British came on shore. And we all know how well the British translate foreign languages. Not so well. So the British are talking to the Spanish guy. And I said, "What do you call the place?" And he said, Cayo Hueso. And one of those British guys looked at him and he said, "Did you say Key West?" Nope. Cayo Hueso. He said, "I'm sure you said Key West." "No, sir." Cayo Hueso. British fellow looked at him and he said, "Well, we're going to call the place Key West, because I'm sure that's what he was telling us. And we've been called Key West ever since." Now you know how we got our name. Now some years later, a fellow by the name of Henry Morrison Flagler came here. Mr. Flagler, well, he was a rich guy. He was partners with John D. Rockefeller in a little company called Standard Oil. Gee whiz, did he have money. Well, he decided he wanted to build himself a railroad, so he started up in Boston, came all the way down to Florida. When he got to Florida, he built a big, beautiful hotel in every major city, and railroad tracks in between. But he stopped in Miami, didn't come down here. A couple of years later, one of his buddies said, "You know, Henry, may want to rethink that. May want to go down to Key West." He said, "Why would I do that?" He said, "Well, they're about to open that little thing called the Panama Canal. And when they open that up, there's going to be lots of big ships coming over here from California. Those big ships, they're going to need a deep water port to refill all their supplies. The first deep water port they're going to come to, Key West." So Henry agreed with him. So what did he do? He spent $50 million of his own money And he built 42 bridges between here and the mainland and brought the railroad here. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Now I noticed you all are looking out there at the Atlantic Ocean. What you don't see out there, you don't see any waves. Just kind of like a big swimming pool. Well, we have a reef out there. That reef is a living reef. It's just about 5 or 6 miles out. It's part of the 3rd largest living reef in the world. And it goes around almost 2/3 of our island. So all the big waves, they break out on that reef, as did a whole bunch of ships back in the 1800s. I'll come back to that topic in a few minutes. This big fort right here on our right, this is the West Martello Fort. It was built before the Civil War, but it was never finished. They finished the East Martello down the street about 1860. They were working on this one when they invented a new kind of cannon that made this obsolete, so they stopped building it. This fenced-in area right here on your right, that's the African Cemetery at Higgs Beach. The folks buried there, they were on slave ships coming over from Africa. When the Army pulled those ships into this port, we never had slavery here. So they let all the slaves go, and there were a whole bunch of folks on those ships that had died on the way over. That's who's buried in that cemetery. And that's our memorial to them. Now this pier that goes out here on our right, this pier is called the White Street Pier. It goes out 1/4 of a mile. That platform out there is huge. You can't really tell that from here, but it's big. Now the locals call that the unfinished road to Havana. Now you can go out there and you can watch sunset, you can watch sunrise, you can go fishing, lots of things to do. Now my wife and I, we like to ride our bikes out there, and we always go out the day before a big storm is coming in. Because when you have a big storm coming and you go out on that platform out there, big waves will splash up on that platform. Why do we like that? Well, we like that because we have a golden retriever. And our golden retriever, her name is Lola. And Lola likes to chase those waves. And she catches them all with her mouth. Just ask her, she'll tell you she'll catch every single one. And she'll run around out there for a couple of hours. We'll take her home and she'll sleep for the next 6 days. But she sure likes to do it. So we do it. Now how many of you folks know what a conch shell is? Oh, we have a few. Good. Well, a conch shell is a pretty big shell. It's had about that big. If you cut one end off, blow into it, sounds like a horn. But that's not important for this story. What is important? Is that inside of a conch shell, there's a little critter. That critter's about that big. That critter is edible. We learned that from the Bahamians. They used to cook them all the time. The British put a tax on all the food being imported into the Bahamas in the 1800s, so they resorted to eating the little guys that size, the conch shells. Well, they created 14 recipes. 2 of them are favorites of mine. Yeah, you can laugh at that, that's okay. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit more about that shipwreck business. So back in the 1800s, I told you a lot of ships were wrecking out on that reef. And when I say a lot, in average, 2 to 3 ships a week would wreck on that reef right here in Key West. One year, we had 500 wrecks just here in Key West. Now, whenever a ship would wreck, all the folks who lived here who had smaller boats would rush out to that wreck and save all the people, as well as all the goodies that were on those ships. stuff that was on the ship would get sold at auction. Remember that big red building downtown? That's where the auction happened. Now when they auctioned the stuff off that was inside of a ship, the first 50% of the money from the sale went to the original owner of the boat. The next 25% went to the first ship's captain that got out there to help save everybody's life. The last 25% got split up amongst all the other people from Key West that went out to help. So everybody on this island was making lots and lots of money. So much so that in the 1850s, Key West had the highest per capita income of anywhere in the entire United States because of the shipwreck business. Now there is a shipwreck museum downtown, and that museum will tell you the entire history of that time, as well as show you some pretty neat stuff. Now to your right over here, these are kapok trees. These trees, they grow a canopy as high as 200 feet. Their roots go down into the ground 100 feet into that solid rock they find a way. This big pink building up here on our right, this used to be a cigar manufacturer back in the 1800s. Now shotgun home, if you open the front door and you open the back door, you can shoot a shotgun right down the hallway, won't hit anything. All the rooms are built off that hallway, and if you open the side windows, you get a beautiful breeze. So they call them a shotgun home. Now those houses were built by that cigar manufacturer. Some of his employees would live there. But the main thing I want you to notice in this neighborhood, I want you to look up at the roofs. All the roofs are made of metal. So in the year 1886, we had a great fire on this island. That great fire burned down 2/3 of the city. Burned it to the ground. And what the townsfolk noticed as the fire was raging was that the fire was jumping from roof to roof. Everyone had a wooden roof back then, and there was no way they could stop it. So the city was burnt down. Now there was one big building that did not burn down during the Great Fire. That building is downtown, and I will show it to you when we go by. That building had a metal roof and brick walls. I'll point it out a little later. But there was a second reason that we had metal roofs. We didn't have running water on this island until 1942. That's right, no running water. What you had was a metal roof and a gutter and a cistern. And when it would rain, all the water would run down your gutter into your cistern, and that's all the water you had until the next time it rained. So you better know how to handle it. Now what happened in 1942 to change all that? In 1942, World War II was raging. There were German U-boats right off the coast. So the Navy sent a whole big bunch of boats here and ships, and submarines as well. They sent 30,000 personnel. Now we only have 25,000 people that live here at the height of season, so we just did not have enough rain, period. So they finally built us a pipeline down from Miami in 1942. Now on our left-hand side here, this is our cemetery. And you'll notice that all the graves are built above ground. Now you remember I told you earlier that you can't dig down into this island. I meant it. They're all above ground. Now my sources tell me that people are dying to get in here. Now, if you look straight across there, you're going to see an American flag back there. That American flag stands over the memorial to the folks who died on the USS Maine. And quite a few of them are buried right there. Now, there are 75,000 souls buried in this cemetery, and we only have 25,000 people that live here at the height of season. So now you know why our ghosts and gravestones tours are so popular. We have way more ghosts than we do people. Now I'll tell you folks about a couple of ladies who lived on this island who had quite a sense of humor. One lady, before she passed away, she had her headstone made. On her headstone she put, "I told you I was sick." Now another lady, whose husband was a well-known philanderer here on the island. Well, when he passed away, she put on his gravestone, "At least I know where he's sleeping tonight." Now, ladies, I'm not a gambling man, but if I was, I would put money on the fact that she probably helped put him in that last bed. That's just me. All right, now we're going to make a left-hand turn here. We're going to go up the hill. We're going to go to the highest point on the island. That point is the longest point. I'll point it out when we get there. But if any of you folks are prone to nosebleeds at great height, please take your hankies out now, because we're going to be between 12 and 15 feet above sea level. I want you to take a look at these two houses right here. You see the little arrows and the little gingerbread men. Well, those were made by hand. So if someone would ask somebody in town, "Where do I go to get a drink?" they'd say, "Go find the house where the fence says, 'I love liquor.'" So if you can figure it out, then you can go in and get a drink. I'll point it out a little later. I can tell you that the ship captain made a lot of money. You see this big white house here, this big beautiful white house? Take a look at the roof. Up on the roof there, that's called a captain's walk. Now the captain could go up on that roof, and he could see from there the entire reef. So he saw when a shipwreck, and he would rush down and get in his boat and get out there and be the first one there, and get the lion's share of the money. So that house is about 12 feet above sea level. We have just reached Solaris Point. So we're at the highest point on the island. It's about 15 feet above sea level. Now I want you to look at this house on your left. I think it's the most beautiful house on the island. And it also has a captain's walk. So let's picture how many times that captain was the first one out and got the lion's share of the money. Alright, we're going to turn right here on Simonton Street. Now this street is named after John Simonton. John Simonton was the very first American owner of this island. He bought the island from Captain Salas. Captain Salas was a member of the Spanish Army. He had been given the island by the Queen of Spain. He had done some heroic deed or another, and she gave him the island. But he was a bit poor people that thought they owned the island, and that wasn't going to work. So we wound up with a lawsuit. Now this is around 1820. Mr. Simonton was one of those poor people. Now Mr. Simonton, he had a friend who was in the United States Navy. His friend was back in the 1800s. Every ship that came into this port was made of wood. Therefore, every one of those ships had a carpenter on board because they had to, survival. So when those ships would come into port, and they'd be here for weeks at a time, refueling and resupplying, those carpenters would go door to door and knock on doors and say, hey, I'm a carpenter, do you need any work? Now you remember I told you everybody here was making lots and lots of money.
Not true.
And they all had cash. So when the carpenter knocked on their door, they did all that work. And they got paid good money for it. I'll take a look at this fence up here on the top floor. They did that by hand. Now I'm going to tell you about my favorite fence. My favorite fence is on the other side of town, but we'll go by it a little later and I'll point it out to you. But I want you to just take a look at this fence right here, just to give you an example. And see how all those little figurines are cut out. Well, the one that I like the best on the other side of town, it has a row all the way across of little liquor bottles. Right above each liquor bottle, what do you suppose won the lawsuit? Well, the roads are named after John Simonton, and the United States Navy still owns 25% of this island. Now, I want you to take a look at this building up here on the corner on the left. You'll see the Books and Books bookstore. That's owned by a famous author. Her name? Judy Blume. You want to meet her? She's usually there on Sundays and sometimes during the week. Selling books. Our next story is about Ernest Hemingway. See this big white building right here on our left? On the left. That building used to be the Ford dealership here on the island. 1928, Ernest Hemingway had just divorced his first wife, and he was dating a new girl. He was down in Cuba. That's where he lived at the time. And he wanted to take this girl on a beautiful, romantic, and it wasn't here yet. So Ford said that they would put him up in a hotel until the car got there, and they would take care of his expenses. It took 7 more weeks. Now, do I need to tell any one of you what a 7-week free vacation on Key West would do for your mood? Yep, you'd be smiling. That's right. And so were they. So they decided to get married. And she wrote a letter to her very wealthy uncle, and she said, Uncle, we need a house. So he bought them that big, beautiful house we went by earlier today. And that's how Ernest Hemingway came to be on Key West. He would have never, if the car was here, he would have never lived here. Now this building on your right, this big brick one, that's the one building that did not burn down during the Great Fire. It has a metal roof. It has brick walls. And as you can see, you see these big hinges on the door here? It used to have iron doors to boot. That building was owned by William Curry. You remember him, that first self-made millionaire. Inside that building, when the fire hit, he had $300,000 worth of Cuban tobacco. Every other tobacco warehouse on the island burned down. Well, he sold all that tobacco to all of the cigar manufacturers and made himself a fortune. Okay. You see this big yellow building on our right? Well, this building was built in 1903. When this building was built, it was a Coca-Cola bottling plant. One of the very first outside of Georgia. Now I told you that we didn't have running water here until 1942. This building was built in 03. So for the first 39 years of its existence, they could only make Coca-Cola when it rained. All right, we're coming up to the next corner here. We're going to take a little 10-minute break. After the break, 5 minutes left in the tour. So I'm going to let y'all go inside and get something to drink and use the restroom. You want? Buy some souvenirs. But if you go straight in these front doors, if you go straight to the end of that aisle, there's water, soda pop, and ice cream for sale. And the restrooms, the men's room is on the left, the ladies is on the right in the back of the building, but going through these front doors. I saw a boat from right over there. That glass bottom boat will take you right over the top of that reef, and you'll get to see it. Now this big red and yellow brick building, that red and yellow brick building, that was built in 1891 by the Cuban cigar manufacturer. They built it as a bank. They didn't trust the American banking system. You are riding on world famous Duval Street. This street was named after William Hope Duval, the first civilian governor of the state of Florida. This is Coffee Joe's bar on your left. Made famous.
Yes? Yes. No problem.
Now this building on your right here, this is the Bull and Whistle. The first floor is the Bull. The second floor, it's the Whistle. On the third floor, it's called the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is clothing optional. Just a reminder that we had a little theme today. Our theme, children who spent way too much of Daddy's money. Remember? Take a look at this big blue house on our left. That was built by William Curry's oldest son, Robert. That was his house. And guess what? The house next door, the brick one, that was built by his sister. Two children who spent too much of Daddy's money. This white house on the right here, that's the oldest house remaining on the island, built in 1828. Up on the corner here, this yellow building, this was our schoolhouse. If you look at the second floor, you can actually see the bell sitting up on the porch.
Yeah.
This big white building on the left, St. Paul's Episcopal Church. They've been holding services on the island since 1838. This big yellow building on our right, that's the La Conch Hotel. It's the tallest building on the island, 7 stories tall. The top floor is made of glass. That top floor used to be rented by Tennessee Williams on a regular basis. And he was like, if you like a meat lover's pizza, I think theirs is as good as anybody. Right over here on the right, my wife and I, we bring the dog Lola, and we sit out here at one of these tables. Enjoy a pizza. On the right-hand corner up here, this tall brick building, there was the very first pharmacy on the island, built by a doctor. He called it the Key West Pharmacy. This blue place on the corner right here, that was a men's clothing store back in the 1800s. It's a white tablecloth restaurant these days. See these houses that the porch match up and down? Like this one here on the right? That's called Colonial Revival in style. This one on the corner, it matches as well. But the porch goes all the way around. That's called the Bahama style. This big pink building right here, that big building is our library. Now right down here at the end, they have a garden over here that has 25 different kinds of palm trees in it, as well as little benches to read about. system block down the street. Those plungers would go out and shallow them. And they have a big long stick with 3 prongs on the end. And they would reach down and grab them and pull those sponges right up. They bring them into the store there, they would clean them, dry them out, and fill them. Now, today the sponge market is actually in Mallory Square.
I got her something. She went with stop.
On your left-hand side up here, you're going to see a house over here that looks a little odd. It's what's called an eyebrow house. The eyebrow comes out over that top set of windows. They keep the sun off the roof. Keeps the sun off of those windows, which allows it to stay cooler in the summer months. This big white house on the right-hand corner here, that's the Carrasco house. Mr. Carrasco was a Cuban emissary to the United States for 35 years. Before he passed away, he put in his will that he wanted to be buried in Key West. Did not want to go back to Cuba. So he's buried in our cemetery. All right, so directly across the street over here, you see this big statue? That statue is Henry Morrison Flagler. He's the guy that brought the railroad here. That building is our ferry terminal today, but back in 1912, that was our railroad depot. Okay, this is stop D on the map. This is Sails to Rails Museum. This museum is on the history of sailing ships as we moved into the railroad era. This is just a quick stop. Okay, right in front of us, you're going to see the historic Seaport. You see all the boats and the water? Well, that's the Seaport. It goes over here behind these buildings. 35 years ago, that seaport was filled with one kind of boat. They were all shrimpers. The millionaires pushed them out. Now there's only one shrimp boat left, and right now they're out of port. They're out catching shrimp. But this is also called a bight, spelled B-I-G-H-T. A bight is a body of water that is completely surrounded by land, except for one small opening to the sea. So it's a natural seaport. This big mural on your right was painted by Wyland. He's a local artist. He did about 100 of those all over the country. They're all different. This one's number 52. Now if you look to your right over here, you see this big white building on the corner over there? That's called the Schooner Wharf Bar. They're famous for their happy hour. That happy hour goes from 7 until 9. In the morning. Their motto, if you don't start early, you can't drink all day. This big white building over here with the red shutters, that's a ladies' clothing store today, but back in the day, that was called the Bucket of Blood. Now when that was a bucket of blood, they used to check your ID at the front door. And then they would frisk you for weapons. If you didn't have a weapon, they gave you one. They wanted to make sure it was a fair fight. granite. The rest of the building is made from limestone that was quarried up in Isla Morada, mile marker 80. Now coming up about a half a block, he was building a very big, beautiful house on this property up here. Right over on the right here. So he was building this big, beautiful house here when he passed away in 1896. The house he was building was 2 months from being completed. Just 2 months. So he left this house to his son Milton. What do you suppose Milton did? Well, Milton tore down Daddy's brand new house and built this one. Children who spent way too much of Daddy's money. On your left-hand side, right over here, this is the Porter house. That was Dr. Porter's place. He was instrumental in solving our yellow fever problems back in the day. His wife built this big green one next door. She built that for all of her guests to stay at. But most importantly, look straight down the driveway here on our left. You're going to see a little cottage back there behind that truck. She was good friends with Robert Frost, the poet. She sold him one of those cottages, and he came down 11 straight years to write poetry all winter. This big building here was the birthplace of the Pan American World Airways. Now you might remember them. They had those big planes. They looked like a boat, and they would land it right on the water. Well, when they went out of business, they sold that place to Kelly McGillis. Kelly McGillis was the lead actress in the first Top Gun film. Yep. The one with the curly blonde hair. She made a restaurant out of the place and ran it for 10 years and then sold it a couple years ago. This big water tower right here, well, that used to water all the ships. But now we just keep margarita mix in there. Now I want you to look to your right. I told you about a fence before. That fence with the little liquor bottles and the hearts right above it. That house was a speakeasy during Prohibition. These next two houses on your right, these are the Audubon house. John J. Audubon, well, he never lived here. But he did come down and paid his birds. Two of his disciples, they bought these two houses. And they made a museum out of them. They have a big, gorgeous orchid garden out back if you want to check it out. Now, directly in front of us, you're going to see the Shipwrecks Museum. It's a wooden building with a very tall tower on top. If you want to learn all about the shipwreck business, that's a great place to do it. And you can climb up that tower as well. It goes 65 feet above the building, and you can get a really great view of Key West up there. All right, we're going to pull into Mallory Square, but before we do, I just want to say thank you all for coming along, and I hope you had a good time. I've got a few more things to tell you about back here, and then we'll let you go. So this is my first thing is if any of you folks are here and you're going to go to Sunset tonight, or any other night, a lot of people in town will tell you to go to Mallory Square. This is Mallory Square right here on our left. This is where we're going to pull into in a minute. It's surrounded by buildings. You won't see a sunset from there. If you want to go to Mallory Pier, which is directly in front of us, it's just a little bit of a difference. I just want you to knock it off. Okay? On your right-hand side here, there's a free little place you can go in. It's a sculpture garden. It's got a lot of the fellas and ladies who had a lot to do with the forming of this island, and a little story about each one. So we're going to pull in here. We're going to pull right here in front of the Shipwreck Treasures Museum, and this is where our tour will finish. So there's a couple of things here I want to point out. That sponge market is right here on your right. that we talked about. And right next to the sponge market is our aquarium. That's the oldest tourist attraction on the island, built in 1934. I do have coupons for the Shipwreck Treasure Museum, as well as the Sails to Rails Museum. If you like some, I have them up here.
I got no tutu. There we go, folks. All aboard. All right. So, first thing you're going to see, if you look down there to your right, is the Key West Aquarium there. The Key West Aquarium was the very first tourist attraction we had here on the island. 1935, they opened their doors. That big red brick building there off to the right, that is the Key West Customs House. The Key West Customs House is home to the Art and History Museum. When it was originally built in 1891, that was a federal courthouse and also a post office. Now, one of the big main industries we talk about here while we're on this tour is the shipwrecking industry here on the island. And they held a lot of those cases in that federal courthouse there. Off to the right is one of my favorite museums. It's the Mel Fisher Museum. Mr. Mel Fisher was a famous treasure hunter. Came down here to Key West searching for 2 Spanish galleons. Now, he searched for those 2 ships for about 16 years just in Key West. The Santa Margarita and the Atocha. Every single morning he would wake his crew up and he would say, "Today's the day we're going to find that treasure." That's how he woke his crew up every morning. Today's the day. He was famous for those words. Today's the day. 1985, Mr. Mel Fisher did it. He found it. He found over $400 million worth of gold bars and silver bars, emeralds, gold coins, silver coins. You'll see a lot of locals wearing treasure coins around their necks. They call that the Key West dog tag. Presidential gates here on the right-hand side. Those green gates are built in 1906 for President Harry S. Truman. Now take a look at this tree coming up here on the left, folks. This is a banyan tree. This is one of the largest ones on the island. This tree is over 100 years old. And the way those banyan trees work, when one of those limbs come down and touch another part of the ground, they create another trunk. And they just keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. The largest banyan tree in the world is in India, and that is 4 acres. On the right-hand side, we have another little banyan tree, but we also have the Key West Post Office. Now, this post office here, it's not your average post office. It's over 100 years old. And it was actually designed and built to look just like one of our forts here on the island. We have 3 forts, 3 Civil War forts here on the island. Now we're getting ready to pass mile marker 0, folks. The most photographed sign on the island. There's one on the right, there's one on the left. The one on the right is facing our right. The one on the right, I mean. Now that's the most photographed sign on the island, folks. It is also the most stolen sign on the island. It takes a 9/16 French to get that sign off that post. There might be one hanging in my neighbor's garage. Beautiful Cape Pop tree there off to the right-hand side, Monroe County Courthouse. Now that courthouse there is, this area here is named Jackson Square, named after Andrew Jackson, Florida's first military governor. Later on, he was president of the United States. Right outside of Annapolis, Maryland. So on Whitehead Street here, folks, this road here was named after a gentleman named William Whitehead. Mr. William Whitehead was a shipwreck survivor, and they rescued Mr. William Whitehead off the reef. There's a wrecking business here. Later on, he purchased the share of the island. He was pretty wealthy. He came over with a chunk of money on that boat there that they rescued. Now off to the right, we have the Sandy Cornish Memorial to Zion Church here. And that church there was built in 1885, right there on the right-hand side. So we're here entering Bahama Village, folks. Bahama Village is where most of the Bahamians settled when they came over here from the Bahamas in the 1800s. Now we had a big seafront business here on the island. That's what most of the Bahamians did for a living. They were spongers. Straight down this road here, Petronia Street, will take you into the heart of Bahama Village, where there's a restaurant called Blue Heaven, built in 1884, one of the oldest restaurants on the island. but Ernest Hemingway didn't actually move in there until 1931 with his second wife, Pauline. And that there, on the other side of that brick wall there, are the famous six stone cats. On the right, we have the Key West Lighthouse on the other side of that banyan tree, above those treetops. That lighthouse there was built in 1847. And you can take the spiral steps all the way up to the tippy top there. Alright, so we're entering Gato Village here. We just left Bahama Village. Gato Village was named after a gentleman named Eduardo Gato. Mr. Eduardo Gato was one of the largest cigar manufacturers on the island. Another huge industry we had as well was the cigar business here on the island. Now, if you were a very good cigar roller for Mr. Eduardo Gato, he would build you a house in this village. To be that very good cigar roller, you have to roll at least 150 cigars, and you would get a house right here in Gato Village. Now, this village was so large, they called it the city within the city. And they provided everything for their people. They had their own schools, their own churches, their own grocery stores, their own drugstores, coffee shops, barber shops, saloons, bakers. They had everything you needed. They called it the city within the city because of how large it was. They even had their own trolley service that would come around and pick up their workers every day and take them back and forth to work. Off to the right here, we have a Navy base here. This is Truman Annex. This is home to Navy housing. There's also a communications center for Boca Chica Naval Air Station on this base here. We got a lot of fighter jet pilots flying around. You might have saw some jets flying around today. Alright, here we are, folks. Southernmost point of continental of the United States. You can't get any more south than this. 90 miles. 90 miles from Cuba. Right now, you are closer to another country than you are from your nearest Chick-fil-A or Walmart. Beautiful ocean out there. Beautiful southernmost point. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. And on the right-hand side there, we have that southernmost house. Built in 1941, that house was. And look, there's a plaque on the wall there. They named their house the southernmost house there. Now, the reason why they named their house that is because they tried to buy the original one coming up here, but they wouldn't sell. So the original southernmost mansion would be right here on your right-hand side. And this house here belonged to Florida Curry, William Curry's daughter. Captain William Curry was Florida's first millionaire. And his daughter had this beautiful house designed and built in 1896. Now, when she had that beautiful mansion designed and built, she had it designed with only one bedroom. That's because she loved throwing huge parties all the time, but she did not like anybody to spend the night. So when the party was over, it was time to go home.
Smart woman.
On the left there, that's Eduardo Gato Jr.'s house, built in 1885. Key West Butterfly Nature Conservatory here on the left, guys. Pretty cool place to go check out right here.
We did that yesterday.
Oh, very nice.
Great place.
You get a butterfly to land on your shoulder?
Yes, I did.
All
She had it.
Good luck.
My pants.
See the pink flamingos?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Children.
Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Alright, so we're on Duval Street, guys. This is where all the action happens. And the train's a little bumpy when there's very few people on it. It's very light right now, so it's a little bouncier. So the further you go down, the crazier this road goes. This is the quieter side here. Believe it or not. There's a restaurant coming up here called La Tida. And a gentleman named Jose Martin used to stand on that balcony right there. And he would hold his independence speeches there when Cuba was fighting for their independence from Spain.
zadnią sekundę samochód.
Okay. I'd rather go away.
All right, folks. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you.